The October wind cuts through Riverside Park as Marcus adjusts his camera settings. Through his viewfinder, the Ferris wheel glows against the starless sky. Suddenly, his vision blurs. Metal groans. Screams pierce the air. The massive wheel tilts, breaks free, and crashes down, crushing families, children, couples. Bodies lie motionless beneath twisted steel. Marcus gasps, stumbling backward. The vision fades. The wheel spins peacefully again, filled with laughing passengers. Marcus's hands trembled as he lowered his camera, the horrific vision still burning behind his eyes. The smell of caramel apples and funnel cake that had seemed pleasant moments before now felt overwhelming, almost nauseating. He could still hear the phantom screams echoing in his mind, mixing with the cheerful carnival music playing from nearby speakers. No, this can't be real, he whispered to himself. But his photographer's instinct for detail had captured every terrifying moment. The way the wheel's central axle had snapped with a sound like thunder. The specific section that gave way first, car number 7, with its bright red paint, and the exact angle of the collapse. Marcus sprinted toward the Ferris wheel, his camera equipment bouncing against his back. The October air felt thinner now, each breath sharp in his lungs. Portland's typical evening mist was rolling in from the Columbia River, creating an eerie halo around the carnival lights. Sarah Mitchell stood at the control booth, her blonde hair tied back in the park's regulation ponytail, checking tickets with practiced efficiency. She looked up as Marcus approached, breathless and wild-eyed. "Excuse me, you need to stop the ride," Marcus said, his voice urgent but trying to stay calm. "There's going to be an accident." Sarah's expression shifted from friendly customer service to cautious concern. "Sir, is there a mechanical problem you've noticed? Are you with maintenance?" "No, I saw it happen. The wheel is going to collapse. Car number 7. The axle will snap. People will die." The words tumbled out faster than he intended. Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward her radio, but she paused, studying Marcus's face. There was something in his eyes, not the glazed look of someone on drugs or the calculating expression of a troublemaker, but genuine terror. "Look, I know how this sounds," Marcus continued, pulling out his business card. "I'm a photographer. I was taking pictures when I saw it. Please, just stop the ride and check the equipment." What harm could it do? The Ferris wheel continued its lazy rotation, each car swaying gently in the evening breeze. Families waved from their seats, couples snuggled closer in the cooling air. Children pressed their faces against the windows to see the park spread out below. Everything looked normal, peaceful, safe. But Sarah had worked here long enough to know that equipment could be unpredictable. Last summer, they'd had a minor incident with the tilt-a-whirl that could have been serious if not caught early. Her supervisor always said it was better to be overcautious than sorry. "I'll radio for a maintenance check," she said finally, keying her walkie-talkie. "Control, this is Sarah at the Ferris wheel. Requesting immediate equipment inspection before the next load." As the wheel gradually slowed to a stop, allowing passengers to disembark, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and lingering dread. He'd changed something, maybe prevented the disaster he'd seen. But why had he seen it at all? And why did the feeling of impending doom still cling to him like the mist rolling off the river? 20 minutes later, a maintenance worker emerged from beneath the wheel's base, shaking his head grimly. "Sarah, good call on that inspection. The main bearing assembly is showing stress fractures. Another hour of operation, and we could have had a real problem." Marcus watched from a distance as they cordoned off the ride, his heart still pounding. He'd prevented the disaster, saved dozens of lives. But as he walked back toward his car through the emptying park, something cold and certain settled in his chest. This wasn't over. Somehow, he knew this was just the beginning. 3 days after the Ferris wheel incident, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that invisible eyes were watching him. He'd returned to his normal routine, working at the graphic design studio downtown, grabbing coffee at his usual spot on Burnside, editing photos in his apartment overlooking the Willamette River, but nothing felt normal anymore. The local news had picked up the story. Quick thinking prevents potential carnival disaster. They'd interviewed him briefly, though he'd been careful not to mention the vision. How could he explain that he'd seen people die in a future that never came to pass? Detective Frank Torres found Marcus at Stumptown Coffee on a gray Thursday morning. The veteran cop slid into the seat across from him without invitation, his weathered face serious beneath steel gray hair. "Marcus Hayes? I'm Detective Torres, Portland PD. I wanted to talk about the incident at Riverside Park." Marcus's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "I already gave a statement. I noticed something didn't look right with the ride and reported it. That's all." "Right. Thing is, we've had 3 deaths in the past 48 hours. All people who would have been on that Ferris wheel if you hadn't shut it down." Torres pulled out a small notebook, flipping through pages. Jennifer Walsh, 19, fell from her apartment balcony on the 5th floor. Tommy Brennan, 34, construction worker, plummeted from scaffolding on a job site. And this morning, Maria Santos, 42, somehow went over the railing at the Vista Bridge. The names hit Marcus like physical blows. He remembered their faces from the Vision Jennifer in car number 3, laughing with her boyfriend. Tommy lifting his daughter to see better. Maria taking selfies with her sister. They'd all been there in his premonition, all crushed when the wheel came down. Coincidence, Marcus managed, though his hands were shaking around his coffee cup. Torres leaned forward, his cop instincts sharp. 3 people, all scheduled to be on the same ride, all dead from falls within 48 hours of avoiding that ride. That's not coincidence, son. That's a pattern. The detective's radio crackled to life. "All units, we have a jumper on the Ross Island Bridge. Male, approximately 25 years old, red jacket." Marcus's blood turned to ice water. In his vision, he'd seen a young man in a red jacket in car number 5. David Park, according to the ticket log Torres probably had access to. "I have to go," Marcus said, standing abruptly. "Hayes, if you know something." But Marcus was already pushing through the coffee shop door, his camera bag slung over his shoulder. The October rain that had been threatening all morning began to fall, turning Portland streets slick and gray. He drove toward Ross Island Bridge with desperate urgency, his Honda Civic sliding slightly on the wet pavement. The bridge stretched across the dark waters of the Willamette, its steel spans disappearing into low-hanging clouds. Emergency vehicles lined the bridge approach, their red and blue lights reflecting off the wet asphalt. Marcus parked and ran toward the commotion, his camera bouncing against his back. David Park stood on the wrong side of the bridge railing, his red jacket bright against the gray morning. He was young, maybe 25, with dark hair plastered to his head by the rain. His knuckles were white as he gripped a metal barrier behind him. "I keep seeing it," David called out to the negotiator, trying to talk him down. "The wheel falling, people screaming. I was supposed to be there. I was supposed to die there." Marcus felt the world tilt around him. David was experiencing the same visions, the same certainty about what should have happened. But instead of fighting against fate like Marcus was trying to do, David seemed ready to surrender to it. "You can't run from it," David continued, his voice carrying over the sound of traffic and rain. "I've tried. But death doesn't like to be cheated." The negotiator, a woman in a police windbreaker, kept talking in calm, measured tones. But Marcus could see in David's eyes the same haunted look he'd been seeing in his own mirror. Then the wind gusted, stronger than anyone expected. David's grip slipped on the rain-slick metal. For a moment, he seemed to hang in space, his red jacket a bright slash against the gray sky and dark water below. Marcus turned away before the splash, but he couldn't escape the sound. Another name crossed off a list he'd never wanted to see. Detective Torres appeared beside him, rain dripping from his hat brim. 4 people, Hayes. 4 people who should have been on that ride. How many more names are on your list? Marcus thought of the faces in his vision. Dozens of them. Families and couples and children all laughing in the moments before the wheel fell. How many of them were now marked for death in ways he couldn't prevent? I don't know, he whispered. I honestly don't know. By the end of the week, the death toll had risen to 7. Each victim had been scheduled to ride the Ferris wheel, and each had died in a fall from buildings, bridges, construction. Cites even a tragic slip down the stairs at Powell Espokes that shouldn't have been fatal but somehow was. Marcus hadn't slept properly in days. His apartment, usually his sanctuary, felt like a prison. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the wheel falling again, but now he recognized the faces being crushed beneath it. They were the same faces he'd been seeing in the obituaries, the same people who kept dying despite his intervention. Sarah Mitchell called him on Saturday morning, her voice tight with stress. Marcus, I need to talk to you. Can you meet me at the park? Riverside Park looked different in daylight, smaller, more ordinary. The Ferris wheel stood silent, yellow caution tape fluttering in the breeze like prayer flags. Sarah waited by the entrance, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by hollow-eyed exhaustion. I've been having dreams, she said without preamble, about the people who died. I see them on my ride, laughing, having fun. Then I see them falling. Over and over, Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. You're seeing the future that didn't happen? Is that what this is? Sarah's voice cracked. Because it feels like I'm losing my mind. I keep checking the safety logs, the maintenance records, anything that might explain why this is happening. But there's nothing wrong with the equipment. Nothing that would have caused what you saw. They walked through the empty park, their footsteps echoing off the closed game booths and silent rides. The smell of old cooking oil and spilled soda lingered in the air, mixed with the earthy scent of fallen leaves. There's something else, Sarah continued. I found the original passenger manifest for that night. 43 people were scheduled to ride when you stopped it. 7 already dead. But Marcus... She stopped walking, turned to face him. Your name is on the list too. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He'd been so focused on trying to save others that he hadn't considered his own fate. But of course he would have ridden the wheel. He was a photographer, drawn to elevated vantage points, and the view from the top would have been perfect for his night shots. When? He asked quietly. You had a ticket for the 9:30 loading. You would have been in car number 12. Car number 12. In his vision, he'd seen it crushed near the center of the wheel, buried under tons of twisted metal and broken dreams. He should have been inside it. Detective Torres found them sitting on a bench near the duck pond, both staring at the water as if it held answers. His expression was grim as he approached, another notebook in his hand. 8 now, he said without sitting down. Rebecca Martinez fell from the parking garage at Lloyd Center this morning. Security footage shows she just stepped off the edge. No hesitation, like she was walking through a door. Marcus recognized the name from his vision. Rebecca had been in car number 9 with her teenage son, both of them eating cotton candy and enjoying a rare night out together. There's something else you need to know, Torres continued. I've been looking into similar incidents across the country. Prevented disasters followed by a string of deaths among the would-be victims. It's rare, but it's documented. The pattern always ends the same way when death comes for the person who prevented the original disaster. You mean Marcus, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Torres nodded grimly. The person who disrupts fate seems to be last on the list. Like death is saving the main course. Marcus stood abruptly, his photographer's instincts kicking in, even as his world crumbled around him. I need to document this. If I'm going to die anyway, maybe I can at least leave a record. Help others understand what's happening. Marcus, don't talk like that, Sarah protested, but he could see in her eyes that she understood the logic. How many more? He asked Torres, The detective checked his notes. Based on the passenger manifest, 36 people are still alive. If the pattern holds, ... Marcus didn't need him to finish the sentence. 36 more people were going to die because he'd tried to save them. And then, when death had collected all the souls it was originally owed, it would come for him. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his life trying to capture moments, to freeze time in photographs. Now time itself seemed to be catching up with him, demanding payment for the moments he'd stolen. As they left the park, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. In the distance, near the maintenance shed, a figure in a dark coat was watching them. But when he raised his camera to get a better look, the figure was gone, leaving only shadows and the lingering sense that they were all running out of time. The deaths accelerated over the following week, each one more impossible than the last. A yoga instructor fell through a skylight that should have held her weight. A bank manager plummeted down an elevator shaft when the car mysteriously wasn't there. A mother of 3 somehow tumbled over the safety barrier at Multnomah Falls, despite being an experienced hiker. Marcus had started keeping a detailed log, photographing each death scene, interviewing survivors when possible. What he found chilled him to the bone. Every victim had been experiencing the same visions he'd had. They all saw the Ferris wheel falling, felt the crushing weight of metal and destiny, knew with absolute certainty that they were supposed to have died that night. But unlike him, they'd stopped fighting it. It's like they welcome it, he told Dr. Elizabeth Chun, a psychiatrist who agreed to meet with him after he called claiming to be researching a photography project on grief. They sat in her office overlooking the Willamette River, autumn sunlight streaming through tall windows. Survivor's guilt can manifest in self-destructive ways, Dr. Chun said carefully. When someone feels they should have died in a particular incident, they sometimes unconsciously seek ways to fulfill that perceived destiny. But how do you explain the circumstances? These aren't suicides. They're accidents that shouldn't be possible. Dr. Chun studied him over her glasses. Marcus, is there something you're not telling me about your connection to these deaths? He wanted to tell her everything about the vision, about the growing certainty that death was methodically claiming everyone who should have been on that wheel. But how could he make her understand without sounding insane? Instead, he pulled out his camera and showed her the photos he'd been taking around the city. In each image, if you looked carefully, you could see shadows that didn't match the available light sources. Figures in the background that weren't there when he'd taken the shot. Do you see them? He asked. Dr. Chun leaned forward, studying the camera's LCD screen. Her professional composure flickered. That's unusual. Digital artifacts, perhaps? Or, they're in every photo I've taken since the park incident. Watching, waiting. Marcus scrolled through the images. And they're getting clearer. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Emergency at the park. Come now. Marcus excused himself and drove through Portland's afternoon traffic with growing dread. The city looked different now. Every tall building a potential death trap. Every bridge a weapon waiting to claim another victim. He'd started avoiding elevators entirely, taking stairs wherever possible. But even that felt like delaying the inevitable. Sarah met him at the park entrance, her face pale. It's Mrs. Patterson. She was on the list car number 15. She's here, at the Ferris wheel. They found Eleanor Patterson, a 67-year-old retired teacher, standing at the base of the closed ride. She was talking to someone who wasn't there, her voice calm and resigned. I know it's time, she was saying. I've been dreaming about it every night. The wheel falling, the noise, the darkness. I was supposed to be there with my grandson. We were going to ride together and watch the city lights. Marcus approached carefully, his camera ready but not wanting to startle her. Mrs. Patterson? I'm Marcus Hayes. I was the one who stopped the ride that night. She turned to him with sad, understanding eyes. You tried to save us all, but you can't change what's meant to be, can you? I've lived a good life. 70 years of sunrises and grandchildren's laughter. Maybe that's enough. Please step away from the ride. Sarah called out, her radio in hand to call for help. But Mrs. Patterson was already climbing the maintenance ladder, moving with surprising agility for her age. She reached the first platform and looked back at them. "Tell my family I'm not afraid," she called down. "Tell them I go to join Harold." The wind picked up, rattling the chain-link fence around the closed ride. Marcus raised his camera, and through the lens, he saw them clearly for the first time, dozens of shadowy figures surrounding Mrs. Patterson, their hands extended in welcome. The people from the wheel, the ones who'd already died, all waiting to guide her home. The ladder gave way with a sound like breaking bones, though the maintenance logs would later show it had been inspected and certified safe. Just that morning, Mrs. Patterson fell with the same peaceful expression she'd worn in life, surrounded by shadows that only Marcus could see. As the ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, Marcus realized with crystal clarity that he was no longer trying to prevent deaths. He was documenting them, capturing the moment when the natural order reasserted itself, when the balance was restored one soul at a time. Detective Torres found him sitting on a bench 2 hours later, staring at the photos in his camera. 24 names left on the list. 24 more people whose borrowed time was running out. "It's accelerating," Torres said, sitting down beside him. 3 more today, in addition to Mrs. Patterson. "I don't think we can stop it anymore." Marcus nodded, scrolling through image after image of shadows and light, of death made visible through his lens. "I don't think we were ever supposed to stop it. I think we were just supposed to bear witness." By the time only 5 names remained on the list, Portland felt like a city under siege by an invisible enemy. The media had started calling it the Riverside Curse, though they couldn't begin to understand the true scope of what was happening. Marcus had stopped sleeping entirely, spending his nights driving through the city's empty streets, photographing the shadows that grew longer and more distinct with each passing hour. Sarah had quit her job at the park and was staying with her sister across town, but it didn't matter. Distance meant nothing to whatever force was hunting them. Detective Torres had tried to put the remaining survivors under protective custody, but how do you protect someone from fate itself? Marcus sat in his apartment at 3 a.m., surrounded by hundreds of printed photographs spread across every surface. The story they told was impossible and undeniable. Death had a face, many faces, and they were growing impatient. His phone rang, startling him from his exhaustion-fueled trance. "Marcus." It was Sarah, her voice hollow. "I can see them now, in my apartment. They're standing around my bed, just waiting." "Stay on the line," Marcus said, grabbing his camera and keys. "I'm coming." "No, don't. It won't help." "They're not here for me yet." Her voice was eerily calm, resigned. "But they wanted me to call you, to tell you it's almost time." Marcus felt ice form in his veins. "How many are left?" "Just us. You and me. Everyone else, She took a shuddering breath. Tommy Chun fell from the Fremont Bridge an hour ago. Lisa Rodriguez somehow got trapped in a grain silo that collapsed. And Jim Morrison, not the singer, the accountant from car number 6, he was found at the bottom of an empty swimming pool. The deep end, 2 left. After 43 people, after weeks of impossible deaths and borrowed time, it had come down to the operator and the photographer. The woman who'd stopped the ride and the man who'd seen it fall. "Sarah, listen to me. We can still fight this." "We can..." "No, Marcus, we can't." Her voice carried a strange peace. "I've seen what happens to people who keep fighting. They suffer longer, die harder." Mrs. Patterson had the right idea. Sometimes acceptance is mercy. The line went quiet except for the sound of her breathing. And in the background, Marcus could hear something else, a creaking, groaning noise like metal under stress. "Sarah, what's that sound?" "The fire escape outside my window. It's old, rusted. I've walked past it 1,000 times. never thinking about how it's only held up by a few bolts. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I used to be afraid of heights. Isn't that funny? I operated a Ferris wheel for 3 years, and I was afraid of heights. Please, just wait for me to get there. We'll figure this out together. I'm not going to jump, Marcus. I'm not that brave or that foolish, but I'm not going to run anymore either. When it's time, it's time. Marcus was already in his car, driving through Portland's empty streets towards Sarah's sister's apartment in Southeast. The city looked different at this hour, streetlights creating pools of safety that felt increasingly fragile, shadows stretching like reaching hands between buildings. He made it 3 blocks before he heard the sound in the distance, metal tearing. A brief scream cut short, then silence. By the time he reached the apartment building, the ambulance was already there. The fire escape hung at a twisted angle, its ancient supports finally giving way under stresses they'd been accumulating for decades. Sarah's body lay on the concrete below, her face peaceful in death, surrounded by scattered photographs that had fallen from her apartment window. Detective Torres met Marcus at the police line, his expression grim but unsurprised. The sister says Sarah was looking through old photos from the park when it happened. Pictures of the Ferris wheel, of happy families riding it. She was sitting by the window when the fire escape collapsed inward. Marcus knelt and picked up one of the scattered photographs. It showed the Ferris wheel in happier times, before his vision, before the curse. Children pressed their faces against the windows of the cars. Couples held hands against the backdrop of city lights. Families created memories that would never be touched by tragedy. As he studied the image, something caught his eye. In car number 12, his car, the one he should have been riding in, there was a figure that didn't belong. A man with a camera, taking pictures even as the wheel began to fall. It was him. In a photograph taken weeks before the incident, there he was, capturing his own death with the same dedication he'd brought to documenting the deaths of others. "Detective," Marcus said quietly, standing up with the photograph still in his hands. "I know what happens next." Torres looked at the image, then at Marcus, understanding dawning in his weathered eyes. "Where?" Marcus looked up at the Portland skyline, at the towers of steel and glass that scraped the gray October sky. In the distance, he could see the lights of his own apartment building, 40 floors of concrete and metal reaching toward the stars. "Home," he said simply. "It always ends at home." Marcus stood in his apartment as the sun set over Portland, painting the Willamette River in shades of gold and crimson. 40 floors below, the city went about its evening routine, people heading home from work, families gathering for dinner, couples walking hand in hand along the waterfront. Normal lives, untouched by visions of falling wheels and borrowed time. He'd spent the day organizing his photographs, creating a comprehensive record of everything that had happened since that night at Riverside Park. 43 names, 43 faces, 43 souls claimed by a destiny that refused to be cheated. The documentation was meticulous, undeniable, and completely unbelievable to anyone who hadn't lived through it. Detective Torres had offered to post a guard, but they both knew it would be pointless. You can't station a police officer between a person and their fate. Instead, Marcus had asked for privacy, for the chance to face what was coming with dignity intact. As darkness fell, Marcus set up his camera one final time. The tripod stood by the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the city, lens focused on the distant lights of Riverside Park. He could just make out the Ferris wheel, still closed, still draped in caution tape, like a monument to might-have-beens. At exactly 9:30 p.m., the time he would have boarded the wheel that night, Marcus felt their presence. Not the cold, menacing shadows he'd been photographing for weeks, but something warmer. Familiar faces began to materialize in his peripheral vision. Mrs. Patterson, with her gentle smile. David Park, without the haunted look that had driven him to the bridge. Sarah Mitchell, as she'd been before fear consumed her. They stood around his apartment like old friends gathering for a reunion, no longer the harbingers of doom he'd imagined them to be. They were simply people who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, souls caught in the machinery of fate until the balance could be restored. "I understand now," Marcus said aloud, his voice steady. "We were never victims of some malevolent force. We were just delayed passengers on a ride that was always going to complete its circuit." Sarah stepped forward, her form more solid now, more real than the shadows she'd cast in his photographs. "You tried to save us all. That took courage. But I didn't save anyone, did I? I just changed how the story was told." Mrs. Patterson's voice was warm, grandmotherly. "Sometimes the how matters as much as the what, dear. You gave us time to say goodbye, to make peace with our choices. That's not nothing." Marcus looked around his apartment at the thousands of photographs covering every surface, at the life he'd built through capturing moments of beauty and truth. He thought about the images he'd never take, the stories he'd never tell, the love he'd never find. But strangely, he felt no regret. His camera's timer beeped, the shutter clicking automatically. Through the lens, he saw them all, every soul from the wheel, standing together in a circle of soft light. And in the center, he saw himself, camera in hand, finally understanding the difference between being a witness and being a participant. The elevator in the hallway began to move, its mechanical hum growing closer. Floor 39, floor 40. The sound was familiar somehow, like metal wheels turning on rusty tracks. Marcus had always wondered why the Building S elevator made that particular noise, a rhythmic clicking that reminded him of something he couldn't quite place. Now he knew. It sounded exactly like a Ferris wheel finding its rhythm, each car settling into place as the great wheel turned. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing an interior that flickered between industrial steel and brightly painted carnival colors. The lighting pulsed gently, like the bulbs that had outlined the Ferris wheel that night, creating patterns that were beautiful rather than terrifying. Marcus picked up his camera bag and walked toward the elevator, feeling oddly peaceful. Through the viewfinder of memory, he could see that night at the park as it should have been. No vision of disaster, no premonition of death. Just a photographer riding a Ferris wheel, capturing the city lights from above, sharing a moment of wonder with 42 other souls who had chosen to see Portland from a different perspective. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Marcus raised his camera one last time. The final photograph showed not death or destruction, but transformation light becoming memory, moments becoming eternal. A wheel that had always been turning, carrying its passengers from one destination to the next. The elevator began to descend, but the floor indicator showed numbers that didn't exist in any building. 43, 44, 45. Each floor representing a soul finding its proper place in the cosmic order, a destiny finally fulfilled. Detective Torres found the apartment empty the next morning. Marcus' cameras and photographs arranged with impossible precision around a single note. The wheel always completes its turn. Some rides just take longer than others. The only unusual detail was the elevator, which maintenance workers swore had been out of order for weeks, its cables worn to the point of breaking. Yet, somehow, it had carried one final passenger to whatever destination awaited beyond the 43rd floor of a Portland high-rise. In the distance, barely visible through the morning mist, the Ferris wheel at Riverside Park began to turn again, not with passengers or fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of time itself, marking moments that bridge the space between what was and what will always be. The wheel of fate never stops turning. It simply waits for us to buy our tickets and take our seats, trusting that every ride, no matter how it ends, offers its own unique view of the infinite sky.